Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into an incredibly intense ancient poem, Psalm 52. What we're looking at here is an absolute masterclass in structural contrast. It's packed with raw emotion and some seriously stark imagery. We're going to see exactly how a real, historical tale of high-stakes betrayal transforms into this profound, timeless study of justice and ultimately trust.
To really feel the sheer weight of this text, we've got to jump right into the thick of the action. The author writes, "Your tongue plots destruction. Like a sharp razor, you worker of deceit." Boom! Right out of the gate, we get this jarring, violent imagery straight from verse 2. It perfectly sets the dramatic stage for the character study we're about to unpack. The author doesn't ease us in at all. They confront us immediately with this weaponized tongue, literally a razor meant to cause serious damage. Section 1. The betrayal of Doeg. So to understand why the language here is so aggressive, we actually need to look at the historical inciting incident, the massive betrayal that sparked this whole thing. What's really fascinating is how it's grounded in history. The actual source text includes a superscription right before verse 1. In these ancient writings, these headers aren't just, extra fluff or an afterthought. They're actually the key to unlocking the whole context. This specific heading grounds our poem in a very real, specific moment of betrayal.
It explicitly tells us that this was written when Doeg the Edomite came and told King Saul, "David has come to the house of Ahimelech." Just think about the dynamics at play here. We've got a crazy high-stakes scenario, a trusted figure acting as a secret informant to a super powerful king. This one tiny piece of past information, just giving up David's location, is the spark that lights the fire. It's basically a classic espionage setup, right? An informant, a king, and a target on the run, which totally explains the absolute fury we just saw in that opening imagery.
But before we get to the verses themselves, I want to point out a tiny little detail that has massive implications. Down in the footnotes, the word maskil, which pops up in the header, is defined as probably a musical or liturgical term. Now that is fascinating. It reminds us that this wasn't just some private diary entry angrily scribbled down in the heat of the moment. No, this was designed to be sung. It was meant to be recited publicly. You have this community literally taking a raw, traumatic event of betrayal and processing it together through structured art.
Section 2. A tongue like a razor. Keeping that historical and musical context in mind, let's look at how the text actively profiles the villain of our story. It starts by calling out a mighty man boasting of evil, and then methodically breaks down exactly how his deceit works. The word choices in verse 4 are incredibly evocative. You love all words that devour. Think about that verb for a second. Devour. It paints this picture of deceit that doesn't just mislead people or, mix up the facts. It actively consumes. It's predatory. The informant's words are literally designed to eat away at the lives of others and cause total destruction.
And this brilliantly illustrates the twisted psychology of the villain. Verse 3 lays out this complete moral inversion. You love evil more than good and lying more than speaking what is right. So we're not talking about an accidental slip-up here or a white lie told under pressure. The text is diagnosing a very deliberate, calculated preference for destruction over righteousness. The villain actually loves the chaos that their deceit creates.
Section 3. Uprooted from the living.
Now, having fully established the extreme danger of this razor-sharp tongue, the poem doesn't just sit there wallowing in despair. Actually, it sharply pivots in verse 5, transitioning from the deceitful man's actions to this forceful, absolute judgment from God. Just notice how systematically the text dismantles the guy here. It escalates the dramatic tension in 3 very distinct steps. First, God will break you down forever, destroying the very foundation. Second, He'll snatch and tear you from your tent, completely removing any shelter or security. And third, He will uproot you from the land of the living, which is just total, absolute removal from existence. It's a complete unmaking of this mighty man who honestly thought his words made him untouchable.
And get this downfall, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Verse 6 shows us that this absolute destruction becomes a total public spectacle. It says, "The righteous shall see and fear, and shall laugh at him." The text is telling us they'll look at this fallen informant and basically say, look at the guy who refused to make God his refuge. It serves as this fearful yet deeply vindicating lesson for the righteous observers. The mighty man's collapse literally becomes a monument to the foolishness of trusting in deceit.
Section 4. The green olive tree.
As the dust finally settles on the villain's spectacular destruction, the poem transitions yet again. We move away from all that violence and uprooting into a much more calm, grounded resolution, shifting focus entirely to the narrator's fate. And here is where we see the absolute structural genius the author uses to bring it all home. We get this ultimate contrast. The villain from verse 7, the guy who trusted in his massive wealth and found refuge in his own destructive behavior, contrasted directly with the narrator in verse 8, who actively trusts in the steadfast love of God forever. The entire poem hinges on this one choice, of where you place your ultimate trust.
And because of that trust, we get this incredibly magnificent imagery in verse 8. But I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. Look at how perfectly this opposes all those earlier elements. We started off with a sharp razor. Then we moved to a tent violently torn away and a man just violently uprooted from the earth. And now, in stark opposition, we're left with this beautiful, deeply peaceful image of a thriving, deeply rooted green olive tree, safely planted right inside the house of God. It's the ultimate picture of vitality and security.
The text resolves with these final promises from verses 8 and 9, demonstrating this lasting posture of resilience. Notice that the narrator doesn't vow to get revenge. Instead, their ultimate response is threefold. First, they choose to trust in God's steadfast love forever and ever. Second, they decide to thank God forever because He is the one who acted. And third, they wait for God's good name in the presence of the godly. It's this beautiful shift away from the dark isolation of betrayal, stepping right into a space of gratitude, patience, and communal faith.
As we wrap up this remarkable structural study of Psalm 52, I really want to leave you with the very challenge this ancient poem is presenting to us today. We've seen the absolutely devastating results of words that devour, and we've seen the deep, grounded peace of the green olive tree. It really all boils down to a single question, echoing all the way from verse 7. When the pressure is on and betrayal strikes out of nowhere, what do you make your refuge?